But then, right, the interesting flip side to that is it's almost like the blessing and the curse of ignorance, right? Like willing ignorance and launching a startup up against, going up against the largest players in the world, not knowing just how difficult that undertaking would be. And so that's kind of when we set out to build this business banking platform because it didn't really exist back then.
Welcome to the Tearsheet podcast. I'm Zack Miller. For U.S. entrepreneurs a few years ago, it must have been strange what was happening overseas. There wasn't one, but a handful of challenger banks launching that were changing the entire banking experience. Sign-up was quick. There was a buzz around their FX, lending, and spending products. But when you looked at what was happening domestically, well, the early neobanks hadn't really caught on. Novo's Michael Rangel set out to change that. And instead of focusing on the consumer, he went after the business customer, a harder and more complicated route to take. Novo now has a business banking platform in market and is going up against some of the biggest banks in the US. SMBs are underserved, and we talk about the approach Novo is taking for building its product for such a fragmented market. Mike describes how the massive opportunity for SMB banking requires a platform approach. We also discuss the dichotomy between digital banking for consumers versus SMBs and how Novo plans to bridge that gap. Michael Rangel is my guest today on the Tearsheet podcast. Before we continue with our program, I'd like to thank our sponsor, MX, for supporting Tearsheet's work. MX is the leading data platform for banks, credit unions, and fintechs, enabling its clients and partners to easily collect, enhance, analyze, present, and act on financial data.
So my name is Michael Rangel. I am the co-founder and CEO of Novo, where we have built a new business banking platform that focuses on today's companies, really putting the power of the bank branch in everyone's palm.
And where did the impetus to build Novo come from?
Sure. So that's actually a loaded answer that I have, which I'm not going to get into.
Hit us up, yeah.
Color today. But the shorter version of that is myself and my co-founder, whenever it was, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, we were seeing what was happening across the pond with all the challenger banking activity. And we were thinking to ourselves, like, damn, that's really awesome, right? It's very cool how innovation is really getting injected over there, how kind of everyone is on the same page with where the market should go and what needs to be instilled to really solve these problems. And then we're here, in New York saying, why the hell is that not happening here, right? Like, this is a massive problem over here as well. And it's interesting to see how, this market is not necessarily following with that same type of velocity. But then, right, the interesting flip side to that is it's almost like the blessing and the curse of ignorance, right? Like willing ignorance and launching a startup up against, going up against the largest players in the world, not knowing just how difficult that undertaking would be. And so that's kind of when we set out to build this business banking platform because it didn't really exist back then.
And so why choose banking as opposed to consumer? What was the thought process there?
Sure. So consumer is just way more saturated, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's way more saturated both in banking and even fintech. From a regulatory perspective, it's easier to get into consumer banking products than it is business banking products. With that said, like business banking has just been a very, very, very underserved market for a very long time in the US. Big banks, right, haven't invested a lot. Actually, let's take a step back. If you think about from a budgetary standpoint where big banks lie, right, there are really two ways that the pendulum swings. On the one way, you have the individual retail or consumer market where you have, the likes of JP, Bank of America, all of these big shops are investing millions upon millions of dollars, tying up a massive amount of internal resources to really crack that egg, right? And figure out how to develop a consumer product, which it might not make a whole lot of sense for Zack or Michael individually, but you know what? Everyone on the whole is basically the same as Zack and Michael. So if we develop this one product, it'll work in theory. On the other side where the pendulum swings, right, is just larger corporate accounts, right? So if you have a large firm or someone asking for some sort of additional functionality or some additional service, these banks corral a lot of internal resources around that because, although they're smaller in number, that's where the wallets get, a lot bigger. So that's where they spend a lot of resources there as well. In the middle of that, you have small businesses, right? Super underserved market. And it's very difficult to address that market because it's very segmented, right? What makes sense to Zack's small business might not make sense to Michael's small business, right? So for a bank like Bank of America, Wells, Citi, et cetera, to invest millions upon millions of dollars and theoretically years of time in developing an internal product, right? For it to almost immediately become invalidated when being launched in market, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So we saw a massive window of opportunity wherein, small business banking has been incredibly underserved. And, we think that we have the chops in order to get in there and really take a wedge with our product and, get it off the ground. And interestingly enough, like there hasn't been a whole lot of movement. There's starting to certainly be now. Mm-hmm. But there hasn't been a whole lot just because it's very complex from a regulatory perspective to get involved.
91% of mobile banking users prefer using their app over going to a physical bank branch. But it's no longer enough just to offer an app. Customers demand a really good experience. That's where MX comes in. Its new mobile app, Helios, helps banks and credit unions stand out in today's world of mobile banking, going beyond simple transactions and account management. Does your mobile app get thousands of 5-star reviews? Does it increase your engagement and lead to higher brand loyalty and ROI? Check out Helios by MX at MX, that's the letters M and X.com.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. So can we talk a little bit about who that target small business customer is and what his or her pain points are?
Sure. First thing, right, if you just think about it from a larger from a larger perspective, when you think about banking in the U.S., there's a massive dichotomy, which you've already alluded to, between the individual retail market and the small business banking market, right? The majority of banks in the U.S. still don't have mobile applications for their small business checking accounts. That's nuts.
It is incredible.
It's 2019.
Yeah.
Right? And the ones that do have it are incredibly, incredibly limited. Like they don't allow you to do a lot of the functionality that a small business owner needs to be able to do. I'm not going to name any names, but some of the arguably the more quote unquote innovative banks, right, do have these mobile business banking applications, but the functionality is limited to reviewing your transactions and reviewing your balances. That's it. For everything else, you need to go to the online portal and submit, whether it be for transfers, et cetera, right? So there's not a whole lot of functionality that a lot of these small business owners are able to leverage while mobile, even though that's where all businesses are really moving, right? And at the same point in time, all these small business owners are, guess what? Also individual consumers, right? So in their individual consumer lives, it's like, all right, my life isn't perfect, but it's not that bad, right? Like if I don't get the tools I need for my bank, there are other tools out there that help me, whether it be, PFM tools like Mint.com or Clarity Money, or different things like that. It's not that bad. And then when I put my small business hat on, it's horrible. Like it doesn't even make any sense, right? A lot of these business owners that we're seeing that are our customers are like, in my individual life, it's okay. But then my business hat where there's actually more money, right? There are no tools, there's no service, and there's such a massive gap between, doing nothing on the one hand and then QuickBooks, right? There's a massive gap. And so that's just something that we're tapping into, saying, there's no reason as to why that same small business owner should have such different products in their individual life and in their small business life. Speaking to that second part of your question of, what are the pain points? That is a massive pain point in and of itself. They want to run their business mobily. That's what a lot of our customers are saying, right? They run their business, on the go all the time. And why shouldn't the bank follow? Why do they have to be kind of limited and tied down in order to leverage those services? That's one thing. Second thing is just everything is very cumbersome. Everything from the initial onboarding application, right? Signing up for the bank application itself is very time consuming, all the way through to, logging into the online portals, using the limited functionality, whether it be, the electronic transfers, customer service, is very underwhelming. That's what a lot of our customers that are coming to us now are saying, right? That, they haven't gotten the tools that they want from their other business banks, and the service is less than underwhelming.
Is integration a big priority for them? It sounds to me like they're using lots of other applications. You named a few of them, QuickBooks. Is it important that everything kind of talks to one another?
So, yes, right? Yes, yes, yes. More so right now, in theory, right? There are connections that a lot of banks have, whether it be with accounting platforms, et cetera. When you actually think about banking, right, and you actually compare the way that banking is here with the way banking is, let's say, across the pond in Europe, banking is incredibly siloed, right? You will never have, let's say, an account at Bank of America, and you'll never have your rep at Bank of America saying, hey, Zach, you know what? You should actually really check out this American Express credit card. It's a better product. It helps you with your business. And, we just think that there's going to be more value in it for you. Like, that will literally never happen, right? That's not in their business model. They want to own you as a business or a customer and own every aspect of it. So Novo's standpoint is, we want to create all of these integrations with best-in-class services and different products in order to offer kind of this sense of a financial watchtower over our users, right? We're doing a lot of pretty cool stuff now in order to create this ecosystem where we are then able to alleviate a lot of this stress that a small business owner wanted to deal with. Like, the average business owner goes to, I think the number is around 7 different online portals, to then try and piece together all of that information back in order to get a better, clearer understanding of their financial picture, right? So, like, that's crazy, right? That's a lot of wasted time, a lot of duplicative effort. And so there are different ways that we're looking to kind of bring everything and centralize it in order for there to be, one central command center, if you will, for the business owner.
And Michael, it sounds like from what you're saying, it's not just enough to get the two systems or multiple systems talking to one another. It's actually thinking through like the workflow for that small business person. Is that right?
Yeah. And that's the thing why you haven't seen a lot of this, right? Is because different businesses have different workflows, right? And not only that, but then different, banks or different companies have different ways that they like to integrate. Right, a lot of banks, for instance, only want to white label stuff. So that's why you'll go into your bank and you'll have some sort of bill pay feature, right, which is super clunky. But there are very different ways that it has always been done before. And the way that we position Novo is kind of the inverse to that, right? We want to go out and say, listen, we know we are not the best in everything. We know we're pretty good at some stuff, and we want to go out and bring that value to our customers, whether it's going out and creating integrations with, we just launched one with Xero, XCRO, the accounting platform. Or, we're going to be launching some other pretty big stuff here in the near future, which I wish I could disclose. But some pretty cool product improvements where we are going out and leveraging other third-party companies in order to facilitate different transaction types that have never existed in the US. And so that's something different that we're approaching the market with.
So let's talk about some of the things that you do well, and describe, like, sort of, I guess, from a future point of view, like what Novo is.
Sure. So, right, Novo is a small business checking account. And to be very clear, this is a small business DDA account, or demand deposit account. This is a full checking account. It's not a prepaid card, nothing of that nature. This would be effectively like a substitute for a Chase, checking account, Citi, et cetera. So with that said, I just kind of want to take this back into theory a little bit, because there's a lot of marketing that surrounds a lot of these products. If you think about it, a checking account is only able to do 3 things. That's it, 3 things. Everyone's going to tout that they do dozens or hundreds of different things, But a checking account is only really able to do three things. It allows you to hold money, it allows you to receive money, and it allows you to send money. That's it. We just allow our customers to do that really easily, right? We allow them to do it very easily, starting with the onboarding process. The average Novo customer completes their applications in about 10 minutes from their mobile device, right? And they're able to open their accounts, within a matter of days instead of weeks or even months of back and forth with banks. So, just from the outset, we're definitely positioning ourselves in a very different way to how it's been done before. From a functionality perspective, right, we allow everyone to process electronic transfers, right, from their mobile application. This is via ACH. And we also allow, people to make paper check payments. We don't give our customers paper check books, but we allow them to store, different payee profiles where they're able to say, Zack Miller at 123, ABC Street, and we will physically print and cut a physical check on the back end and send it to, Zack Miller for his services. We also allow, our customers mobile check deposit and, a few other features like that. But that's really the core functionality of checking that, we just do really, really well, and just we make it really easy.
Awesome. And to build all this, you didn't go and get your own banking license. You're working with a partner. Can you talk about that process and how you decided upon the partner that you did?
Yeah, sure. So that process was pretty interesting. It was myself and my co-founder, Tyler, and we wanted to get into banking. And we saw how banking had always been done before, from a startup perspective in the US, and it was all, kind of following this rent-a-charter model, right? Or effectively kind of paying the bank to operate like a bank. And we saw that, and given that we kind of had this very interesting story of how we built Novo, we didn't have a whole lot of money to burn. We were leveraging our savings, sleeping on couches and garages and stuff like that. And so we were like, okay, well, we're not going to be able to do that, number one. Number two, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to do that, just because it doesn't allow you to really build a long-term sustainable business model. And so we started looking for different ways for us to get into banking. And that's when we found another problem that really no one was paying attention to at that time, is that community banks have been dying all the time, right? These small community banks in the US, right, do not have the same resources, obviously, as some of the larger players. Since the passing of Dodd-Frank, right, compliance and regulatory costs ramp up. They then have to reappropriate former budgets and do, some creative ways of finding the source of those funds, because it's not like they were necessarily making more money than they were before, right? So they have to usually pull from marketing and technology budgets. That then puts them at a disadvantage to retaining their existing customer base as well as going out and acquiring new ones. And we said, okay, well, that's interesting, because that's almost like a perfect marriage between Novo's value prop and the community bank's kind of shortcomings. And we went out and we looked to, filter through the entire banking ecosystem in the US by certain criteria. Then we ended up finding our current bank partner, Middlesex Federal Savings in Boston, which literally could not be a better bank for us. We joke that the bank CEO is our third co-founder. We just see eye to eye on everything. Everything is all about, customer first, customer first, customer first. And it's all about just building the best product. How do we go out and just delight the customer where they haven't ever received this service before? And that's a whole other, piece of the community banking pie that I think is incredible. Community banking, serves such a critical role in local communities, right? If you look back in time, right, they were there to be the ones who knew about local businesses. They knew how to help local businesses and how to prop up their community and they had those relationships. But kind of what happened over time is these community banks are at such a severe deficiency, compared to such larger banks, that it makes it very difficult for them to compete, especially from a technology perspective. And so kind of the vision here with Novo is, let's bring the sense of, community banking back to scale via technology, right? For you, let's say, Zack, for you to go into your local community bank and them saying, hey, Zack, how's the family? How's the business? All this stuff. We saw you in the news. We saw you at the CB Insights conference. It looks like things are going great, right? That obviously does not exist with bigger banks, right? The bigger banks don't know who Zack is, right? Zack is just, a number on a spreadsheet somewhere. And that is unfortunate, but that's just how it has to be when you're just at that high of scale. But then when you're in community banking, it's much more personal, right? It's much more relationship driven. And that's how we have always been from a Novo standpoint. And so, kind of this collaboration between us and Middlesex is really, really strong and really meaningful, just because we see eye to eye in that regard. So
let me ask you something about that collaboration. Like, what does it look like when you're talking about your product roadmap in the future, and what does the collaboration look like, I guess, from a product point of view?
Sure, great question. And what's really interesting about that is, we said, this is like 2.5 years ago now. Yeah, 2.5 years ago is when we started having the discussions with Middlesex, and it's been great because John at Middlesex sees Novo as kind of this vehicle that's going to be able to take the bank into the future from like a technological perspective, right?
Which is why he's your third founder.
There you go. But so from a product roadmap, it's like, how do we grow alongside our users, right? Our small businesses. Right now, the way that we've kind of structured it to date is, we need to start with where the problem is the most severe, right? And we think that is with small business checking accounts. And so we kind of have coined that to be the quote unquote foundation to the financial stack for a small business, right? Because no matter who you are, where you are, how mature your business is, every business needs a small business checking account to operate, period, no matter what, right? Then there are a lot of other things that you're able to kind of layer on top of that over time, but that's over time, and meaning it's not necessarily, it's not a necessity either, right? Whether that's credit cards, whether that's loans, whether it's lines of credit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, we can go on. So we kind of took this back step onto the depository side of the balance sheet, and we said, okay, we need to start here, because if we're able to command the foundation of the financial stack, right, for the SMB, then, right, that's where we have a good foundation for further product improvements, whether that be in credit, whether that be in lending, whether that be, in tangential areas. That's kind of where we were thinking there. As far as a product roadmap is concerned, we have a really big belief that integrations is going to be key. It's going to be key for a couple different things. One, it's going to make our relationships with our customers a lot stickier, because we're able to offer something that other people can't. And that's integrations into, whether it's accounting providers, whether it's other products, whether it's other service providers, whether it's, there are so many other, things or types of businesses that want to partner with Novo, because we kind of open up this arena that has never really been that open before from a banking standpoint. One of the other things that we'll be working on, especially with Middlesex in the not too distant future, is getting into credit.
That makes sense. I guess we have time for one last question. As you're thinking about that product roadmap that you just referred to, what's your personal, biggest audacious goal for the rest of 2019?
For the rest of 2019, my biggest, most audacious goal from a product perspective is not going to sound that audacious at all. But it's not going to sound audacious at all because it hasn't really happened elsewhere. And that's to create almost like this quote unquote MVP, right? So the minimum viable product to the financial ecosystem that we have around our core product.
Hmm.
This gets back to kind of full circle where I was with you earlier in this talk. Banking has always been siloed in the US, always. Banking has never been open. It's been very difficult to collaborate with other pieces of software, other products, et cetera, unless it's in some sort of accounting platform. But from a strict banking standpoint, it's very hard to connect different things and provide value via integration. That is our big audacious goal. That hasn't happened from a banking standpoint. It hasn't happened from a core provider standpoint. And that's what we're shooting for.
Well, definitely keep us posted as you continue to build on that vision. Michael, thanks for joining us on the Tearsheet podcast today.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate the time.